Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The vibes were immaculate in the Big Easy after 2 weeks, but now the Saints are searching for answers after a third straight loss. Also, the Yankees head to Kansas City looking for 2 more wins, and I was right about Aaron Rodgers.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Through 2 weeks, the New Orleans Saints were riding high this NFL season. Ross Jackson was on this program going, I don't know what's happening right now. And unfortunately for the New Orleans Saints, 3 weeks later, either do they. 3 straight losses, including Monday night, a 26-13 L at the hands of the defending Super Bowl champions. Nothing to, sneeze at here. Ross Jackson is in Kansas City at the stadium for us from Locked On Saints. And Ross, what is not working now that was earlier in the season for New Orleans?
Oh, great question. I think there's a couple of different things. I think the first of which is everything. I don't really know that there's a lot that's going well for New Orleans right now. They're a team that 3 weeks ago lost because of injuries, right? 2 weeks ago lost because of self-inflicted wounds. And then this week they lose because they were simply outclassed and outcoached. So typically when you have good teams proving that they can win in multiple ways, the New Orleans Saints have gone on a tour showing that they can now lose in multiple ways. So I think that has been kind of the bigger story around the New Orleans Saints. Is actually bigger than the 91 points that they scored over the course of the first 2 weeks. No one expected them to show up here in Kansas City and win this game, but no one expected them to lose like that either. And I think that is very telling about where things could be headed for this New Orleans Saints team, being a very disappointing one by the time that 2024 wraps up.
Yeah, losing in a multitude of ways. At least they have the versatility, Ross, I suppose, if you're gonna have a glass half full viewpoint of this. No, in all seriousness, I think this is a team that it looked like they had found something offensively. Clint Kubiak was cooking. All of a sudden, we're like, hey, this is the new hot offensive mind that we're looking at here. And all of a sudden, Alvin Kamara, 11 carries for 26 yards. Derek Carr, 18 of 28. And we do have to get to the Derek Carr injury part of this. Mm-hmm. But even before that happened, this offense was not clicking the way that we have seen it. And that has been true of all of really the last 3 weeks. What is the most concerning piece here offensively that has just not been clicking the way that we'd want it to if you're a Saints fan?
Yeah, I think the big thing is the Saints' kind of inability to adjust, right? Like when they are in a game to where they don't have a run game, everything suffers. They don't kind of have a counter punch to turn to that says, okay, that's not working. Now let's go to this other piece of the bread and butter. This is a New Orleans Saints team that thankfully this year has an identity. The issue is that its identity is very one-dimensional. If they can't get their run game going, then the rest of the offense suffers. They have a hard time getting it off the ground. And that's really tough when you're a team that's also dealing with a litany of offensive line issues as well, and even benching one offensive lineman during this game.
Yeah, defensively, though, Ross, you lose to the Eagles, but that's a game where you only give up 15 points. The Falcons, I don't know, giving up 26 to the Falcons looks a little better now than what we saw them do to Tampa last week. But this is a game with no Rashee Rice, no Hollywood Brown, and Patrick Mahomes goes 28 of 39 for 331 in this game. And then Kareem Hunt, who was working at like Foot Locker last week, 27 for 102 and a touchdown in this game. That's the kind of thing that if you're a resurgent New Orleans Saints team, if you're hey, we're different now, that can't happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's 2 big keys for the New Orleans Saints defense in terms of how they lost this game. The first of which is yards after contact. The second of which is yards after the catch, yards before contact. And the second one is yards after catch. The New Orleans Saints had no push on their defensive line, consistently walked back a lot of, 3-4 yard gains before Kareem Hunt was even touched in the run game. And then over in the passing game, 251 of Patrick Mahomes' 331 passing yards came after the catch. That's 75.8%, Peter. The New Orleans Saints just not having any luck tackling at the catch point. This has been a consistent issue for them, particularly with crosses over the middle of the field. It's been a years-long problem, and teams are really leaning in and exploiting it here over the course of the past 3 weeks.
251, that's the right number?
Yep, 251 yards after catch, according to Pro Football Focus, by Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. In fact, Next Gen Stats also kind of back that up a little bit. 300 of Patrick Mahomes' 331 passing yards came on passes less than 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. So it just doesn't get any better the further you dig into the numbers.
That is outrageous.
Yep.
I can't even believe that is a real thing. But this is something that has quietly been happening to the Kansas City Chiefs offense over the last season plus, where they have leaned into all of that. It doesn't seem like it matters who you put out there. Now that we sit here, Ross, week 5, 2-3, you cannot possibly feel more different about this team than we did 3 weeks ago. So where do they go from here?
Well, I think it kind of depends on what the story is around Derek Carr, right? Derek Carr leaving the game with about 9 minutes left with an oblique injury, not able to come back into this matchup. If that ends up being a long-term injury, then that doesn't mean anything good for the New Orleans Saints outside of maybe a higher draft pick. So that's going to be the big thing when it comes to the future of this team and where they go next. What is the status of Derek Carr and how quickly can they get him back out on the football field? Is it this Sunday in a big must-win division game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or is it something that's later on down the road and the Saints have to turn to one of their young quarterbacks, which could cause a lot of concern for this team and their ability to turn things around?
I just checked, Ross. Just the yards after catch number for the Chiefs this week would have been the 13th most productive quarterback in week 5. That's just the after the catch number.
Yeah.
So that just gives you an idea of how much that is. Ross, we appreciate your time as always.
Anytime, dude.
Stay up to date on the New Orleans Saints all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Saints on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Yankees and Royals are all knotted up as they head back to KC. Before we get to that, the Tigers got a big homer off a guy who doesn't give up homers. Hey, NFL fans, you can kickstart your NFL season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can place that bet on, how about some Week 6 NFL action? Thursday night features an NFC West rivalry showdown. The Niners and the Seahawks. FanDuel likes the 49ers in this one, despite their struggles this season, and has them laying 2.5 points. Seattle has the better record and is the home team, but I guess the 49ers have had more success in recent years. This is going to be a one to watch for sure. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Detroit Tigers outfielder Kerry Carpenter accomplished something rare. He hit a home run off Cleveland Guardians closer Emmanuel Clase, and the series heads to Motor City tied at 1.
Kerry Carpenter, the 3-run bomb to seal it for the Tigers and give them their first win in the ALDS. Even the series up at 1, and oh man, Tarek Skubal gonna Skubal. The Tigers became fans of Cleveland. There is no doubt about it. A 3-0 victory on the backs of Tarek Skubal and Kerry Carpenter with the 3-run homer off of Emmanuel Clase. And for all the Guardian fans that were in my comments all episode long after the game 1 victory. Listen, some of it was warranted. Yes, the Guardians have the best bullpen in the bigs. I obviously am a little bit biased, loving the Tigers bullpen, and the stats back it up. All that is merited. But if I have to listen to somebody tell me that Emmanuel Clase is the Cy Young winner of the American League instead of Tarek Skubal, I'm just going to show him that clip.
The Raiders are in disarray on offense. Devontae Adams wants out, and when asked about it, Las Vegas head coach Antonio Pierce simply said, "You'll have to talk to Devontae." When it comes to the quarterback situation, though, Pierce wasn't making a firm commitment on who his starter will be in Week 6. He likes Aiden O'Connell, though.
Yeah, I think, even from live in the film, what we know we're going to get with Aiden, right? That back foot hits the ground, the ball comes out. Aiden understands the cerebral player, knows where the ball needs to go. So, I've seen enough Aiden last year and a lot this year. I know what to expect when Aiden gets in the game.
1 month after a new lawsuit accused Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson of sexual assault and battery, the case has been resolved, according to the plaintiff's lawyer. The settlement is confidential. Watson, for his part as the Cleveland Browns quarterback, has gotten off to one of the worst statistical starts of an NFL season in modern quarterback history. Monday was the day of the underdog in the Major League Baseball playoffs. First was the Tigers that even their series in the Kansas City Royals got a 4-2 win over the New York Yankees in the Bronx. Stacey Getsoulias from Locked On Yankees joins me now. And Stacey, for the balance of the season, we were talking about what could or couldn't propel the Yankees to where they wanted to get to. We talked a lot about starting pitching. And this one, Carlos Rodon doesn't even make it through the fourth inning, gives up 4 earned runs. Is it any more complicated to just say that wasn't good enough?
Oh, yeah. No, it wasn't good enough. And the thing about it was he started off so well. He was so fired up and, 3 strikeouts to start and just looked
great.
Like he was really, like I thought to myself, oh, okay, this is interesting. And he was all fired up. And then something happened that always happens when Carlos Rodon pitches. He gave up a home run to Sal Perez. He gives up home runs to Sal Perez all the time. And I don't know why he let that get to him, but he let it get to him and then he fell apart.
So I think it would also be surprising if I had told the summer self, you sweet summer child, that the Yankees in a playoff game would just manage to scrape 2 runs across, given the firepower in this lineup. How do they get a little bit more out of these bats right now?
I wasn't that shocked. But I thought the problem was going to be Cole Reagan's really shutting them down. The Yankees really just shot themselves in the foot consistently by getting Kansas City was basically like, here, we're going to walk you guys. Maybe you guys can score on this. And no, double play after failing with runners in scoring position. They've been atrocious with runners in scoring position so far in these 2 games against them. And I just had a feeling that they were going to lose the second game, but I thought it was going to go a different way. I really thought it was because Reagan's was just going to shut them down. And it was really just them not doing what they needed to do.
We haven't seen the best from Giancarlo Stanton or Aaron Judge so far in this season, or excuse me, in this series. And so, look, if your star players aren't going to show up, like it's going to be hard to win these games. Is this just going to be, hey, if those guys play well, they can win, and if they don't, this is what it looks like?
Well, the Yankees won on Saturday without Judge, and honestly, without Garrett Cole. I mean, his start wasn't that great, and they still ended up winning that game. It's really the other guys have to step up when your star player isn't hitting. And those guys did that on Saturday. They didn't do it on Monday. Yeah. And that's the key. The knock against the Yankees basically all season was that their offense was Judge and Soto. And they just need to have guys lower in the batting order to try and do things when like they have to pick up the top of the order, basically, is what I'm saying. If the top of the order can't do something, the Yankees love giving up hits to the 9th hitter on the opposite team. Why can't the Yankees 9th hitter do what they do?
Yeah, Judge and Soto combined 1 for 6 in this game, though there were some walks in there as well. This team, not necessarily, I mean, you think, okay, Soto, Judge, Stan in particular, they can manufacture runs with home runs. Can they lean into some? They said, okay, put the guys on base. That says to me, hey, maybe play a little small ball if we can here. Is this team, do they have the versatility to do that if they need to?
They do, but can they? That's the question.
Yeah, because
they have the guys to do it. It's just, can they do it? And it's really, they're so hot and cold. And they get hot and cold at the worst possible times, like in the division series or in an ALCS or something like that under Aaron Boone. It just, Yankee fans are becoming like Met fans pre-Grimace. We're just, we feel like everything, the sky is falling at every moment, no matter what is happening. And you could see it with the Yankees losing on Monday night. Just, you would think they were down 0-2 when they're tied 1-1 going into Kansas City. But as I said at the start, I feel okay about this because the Yankees are better on the road. So I think they can actually win 2 in Kansas City, but they just have to stop tripping over themselves and actually hitting the ball.
Stacey, I say this with love. You understand that every baseball fan over 30 is is in no way sympathetic to Yankees fans and their plight, right?
Oh, I know that very well. I do. I get it. I know that people are, especially the people who don't have teams in the playoffs, and you see them on Twitter and they're just so happy to see the Yankees stumbling. Yeah, I know.
Stay up to date on the New York Yankees all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Yankees on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, I tried to warn you about Aaron Rodgers, but nobody wanted to listen. I was right. I tried to tell you about Aaron Rodgers. I tried to tell you he was done, or at least trending in the done direction. I tried to tell you that it wasn't going to go the way that so many thought it would in New York, but you wouldn't listen. Just ask Tony Wiggins and Julian Council over on Locked On NFL.
Julian, we sat here and thought, okay, this will be cool. Aaron Rodgers will be given the Tom Brady treatment. And in order to be given the Tom Brady treatment, you kind of got to be Tom Brady. You know what I'm saying? That's like on Leave It to Beaver. You're going to take Ward Cleaver out and stick Rick James in there. That ain't going to work. That family dynamic is going to break down a little bit. And this is all about Aaron Rodgers. And poor Robert Saleh is going to get fired probably because of it.
Yeah, and honestly, he should have been fired before when they failed by drafting Zach Wilson, and he was completely unplayable for those 2 seasons, which led to them to bring in Aaron Rodgers. Rarely do you see a head coach and GM, Joe Douglas, he's going to be gone too, because he is complicit in all of this. Absolutely. Rarely do you see these guys get a second opportunity to bring in a quarterback of even Aaron Rodgers' caliber, but they haven't had Aaron Rodgers. They had him last year for 5 plays. And you have to just be realistic. A guy is coming off of an Achilles tear at that age, and he has little experience with the receivers in that room. Looking at Garrett Wilson, he's outstanding, but everybody else, like Alan Lazard was terrible last year, and so far this year has been a little bit better, but still not great. Mike Williams is coming off of an ACL tear. I just look at this Jets offense, and I saw them back in training camp against the Panthers, and I'm looking at that team like, that's supposed to be a Super Bowl contender? Because Rodgers looked terrible then, and he looks terrible now. And understand this, too. Like Jimmy Trena, who writes for The Corpse at USP Sports Illustrated, had an amazing tweet I saw yesterday. He said, what should never be forgotten is that Aaron Rodgers was 90% retired, locked himself into a dark house for a few days, and had a revelation that he wanted to play for the Jets. Aaron Rodgers went away in a dark room for 3 days and said, you know what? I want to start smoking Jets. I want to be a part of the New York Jets, and I want to go out there and embarrass myself on Sunday afternoons in London, England. Like, it's over. It's over. For
yeah,
him.
man.
It's over for Salah.
No,
it's over for
I absolutely agree with you. And he got what he was asking for. And the Jets got what they were asking for. Because Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers and everybody else told us that this is how this dude has been. He's been acting. The older he gets, what's that name of that movie? Benjamin Buttons. The older he gets, the more he acts like a petulant child. And you can see his body language on the sideline, bro. It's just almost like he doesn't get his way. He's like little Timmy in the grocery store that doesn't get to grab the bubble gum. It's almost like eyes rolling, not interacting with his teammates. Every time somebody makes a mistake, the hands go up, the look goes up, and nothing is ever his fault. And to me, that's a problem.
It's not just that Rodgers hasn't thrown for 300 yards in a game since the calendar year 2021. He still has the arm to make great throws. He just hasn't been able to do it consistently for a very long time. And then he has an Achilles injury. And he's in a place that has acquiesced to his every desire, that has hired his buddy to be the offensive coordinator, to run an anachronistic offense, an offense where Garrett Wilson is looking around going, hey, all these other teams, they do stuff to make life easy on the offense, and we want to do it all the hard way. Well, this is what you get when you do it the hard way. The hard way is the Aaron Rodgers way, but Rodgers wants to do it because it's his way. And that's the only way he wants to do it. In 2020, he was the MVP of the league. It was one of the best seasons of his NFL career, probably his second best year. In his 30s, late in his 30s. And the next year, the offense looked less like that 2020 offense and more like the kinds of things that Aaron Rodgers wanted to do. That was the first signal to me that he only wanted to win his way. And we saw that in the summer of the discontent, the wanting to be traded 2 years before he was actually traded. The signs were there. The writing was on the wall. And the signature was Aaron Rodgers. And finally, We forget about the person, LeBron James, sometimes. We put him on this basketball pedestal and compare him to Michael Jordan and who's the greatest ever to do it. But there's a human side to LeBron too. And that came through after the Lakers' first preseason game. He got to share the court with his son, Bronny James.
Well, for a father, it means everything. For someone who didn't have that, growing up, to be able to have that influence on your kids and have the influence on your son, to be able to have moments with your son, and then ultimately, to be able to work with your son, I think that's one of the greatest things that a father could ever hope for or wish for. So it's pretty cool.
Eventually, we'll get sick of it. I'll get sick of it, I'm sure. But it is hard to be cynical about a cool moment like that and the impact that I can have certainly on LeBron and maybe down the line on Bronny. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On Sports show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, just how crazy is this Major League Baseball postseason? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.